Hello, and welcome to Module 6. Today we're going to be talking about markets and market failures. Markets tend to help us allocate most things in a democratic society. For the most part, we depend on the free agreement between individuals to decide most of the transactions that occur. Although it's fair to say that most markets where large numbers of goods and services are traded have been formalized, even when they're not on a much less efficient level, they still continue to operate. You can see examples of black markets springing up almost spontaneously, given the four conditions that you're going to see by looking at the slides, right? As long as there's diverse preferences, diverse endowments, which is another way of saying as long as people want different things and people are able to produce different things, then you're going to want to trade them. The person in the country who's the very best at fixing a air conditioning system is probably best served fixing air conditioning systems and taking the profits from that and using that to purchase the other things he needs. Because after all, we all only need one air conditioning system in our house, but one person working might be able to produce many air conditioning systems and install them. In fact, the other two conditions for a market are economies of scale, which is another way of saying the average cost of producing a product declines as more output is produced. So if you have a machine that stamps out a part for a car, you could stamp out one and then leave that machine sitting in your garage doing nothing until the next time you need that car repaired. Or you could stamp out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them and sell them to other people who might need that, so that those other people don't have to own one of those stampers themselves. And so the entire premise behind auto repair shops, right, is that somebody can fix your car and you can do something else. And a person who learns how to fix a car, this final condition for a market specialization, actually becomes better at it. And so if I spend all of my time trying to teach public policy to you, maybe I get better at it. But no matter what, it frees up your time to do something else rather than just having to do everything yourself. So there's lots of things going on in this module. You're going to have a midterm. It's an applications assignment that I think is an awful lot of fun. It allows you to take real world problems, usually associated with the paper that you're writing anyway, and to apply specific concepts from the course to it. I'm hoping that you get some ideas that will make your papers better by doing this. But even if not, it's be some interesting and fun ways to apply what you're already learning to the theory and to the theory that we're learning in class. You're going to watch a video about Ronald Coase. Ronald Coase is significant because he was a great proponent of reducing externalities through the market, through the recognition of private property. Sorry, the video, he has a heavy English accent. He got that naturally. He's British. But I think he's pretty impressive. He wrote like 9 articles in his entire career, but they were very transformative. He's probably most famous for his theory of firms, explaining why, rather than being individual actors, we tend to have corporations. and largely related to the lowering of transaction costs. And the lowering of transaction costs, or the cost of making a deal, is a recurrent theme throughout his writing. And it's not that dissimilar to why he came up with the idea that if we recognize property rights and we enforce contracts, that we can actually live in a world where people are compelled, or at least strongly encouraged, to respect the rights of others vis-a-vis externalities, which are when somebody is affected by a transaction without being part of the transaction. Now, sometimes those are great, right? You know, if somebody decides that they're going to build a famous restaurant down the street from you, it might help you because you might get a job at that restaurant. You might you might go to that restaurant. But if, on the other hand, it could be a negative externality. Somebody decides to burn his leaves, and you are next door to him, and the smoke comes billowing up over your fence from his yard, and you can't sit in the back and enjoy the fall evening. Well, then that's a negative externality. And so, Coase would argue that this person's violating your property rights. To whatever extent, you had a reasonable expectation that nobody would be burning leaves next door to you. So I would encourage you to listen to Coase's interview. We're moving right along into Stone. Most of you should be most of the way through the Stone book by now. So you still have a lot of time, but it's getting to be when progress needs to be made. And one of your applications assignments is going to ask you to, or one of your application questions is going to ask you to apply something you've learned from the earlier part of the Stone text. So I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't gotten started, it's really going to start to catch up with you. You're running out of time to get started. You're not running out of time to be finished. So lots of interesting ideas that come up. I would say that the articles are a little bit less important than they were in the last module. In the last module, those articles are very, very useful for you to understand public policy theory. The applications assignment is going to reference several of them. You might be able to answer the question successfully without being very familiar, but I don't think that you'll do that well if you're entirely unfamiliar with those articles. I would say that pay more attention to the slides than perhaps ever before. These slides are taken closely from Munger's Analyzing Policy. Again, it's kind of the shadow book for the course. It's getting a little dated. Right now I'm rushing my way through Munger's more updated text, and I would hope that future editions of this class will at least be looking at a 2015 Munger textbook. These chapters are very approachable, and so that's why we're focusing on them. It was my impression that about half of the book would have been more of a graduate level text. So in any case, what we need to look at here, we're going to talk about externalities. We're going to be talking about the nature of perfect competition, a little bit about the concept of prices as being information. After all, we don't really make trades with product to product very often in our life. If you went to the store and you wanted at the store to grab like Tide or something to clean your clothes, and you had to hope that there was somebody who had just made some more Tide who would be standing around at the store to trade, I don't know, maybe a 10-minute discussion of Ronald Coase with, then I think that we wouldn't get a lot of trades. really on a day-to-day basis don't run into very many people who want to talk to me about Ronald Coase. On the other hand, you probably don't need Tide all that often either. So, but by having money, you are able to take 10 minutes of your time and turn it into a couple loads of laundry. So we talk a little bit about that in the slides. I think that we can look at things like gains from trade, gains from productive efficiency. The second slide presentation deals an awful lot with what to do when markets don't quite work, and I think that that's useful. It's very convenient. Sometimes people act as though markets never work, and that's not true. It's really great that you can buy a pencil, but when you realize that somebody had to mine the little bit of metal that goes around the top of your pencil, and somebody had to tap the rubber tree to get the little bit of rubber that turned into your eraser, and somebody else had to cut the wood, and I don't know how in the world they get the graphite in the middle, but however it is they do that, somebody had to do that. That's an awful lot of people who all have to work together in order to produce a pencil. And there's no way that they're just all standing around together at the same place at the same time saying, hey, let's make a pencil so that we can sell it for what, like 10 for $2. I think that it's truly amazing that just the impetus of a market, just the idea that somebody knew that if they could keep the price down low enough that people would buy pencils, and then that person was able to, through the use of capital, produce pencils that would make even more money. I don't know, I like pencils a lot. Somebody said to me once, nobody deserves to be a billionaire. But if there's a person out there who had, as one single person, invented the pencil, produced all of the pencils that have ever been made, that person has definitely added $1 billion of happiness to the world. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Pareto and the idea of a Pareto optima, a best case where it is impossible for you to make any change without hurting at least one person, as measured by that person's point of view. After all, quite often you can make a change, somebody complains about it, but if they just understood, they would know that you were right. But we're trusting everybody. Pareto viewed that everybody's ability to veto negative outcomes for themselves was the only justifiable way to determine whether or not changes ought to be made in initial allocations. So if you have $1,000 to spend this week, nobody should be spending that money for you except through your own choice. And then the problem is that if you have $1,000 and nothing else, you have to find people who are willing to trade what they have to you for some subset of your $1,000, and that's where everything gets complicated. So what do you do when you've reached a point where any other trade would hurt at least one person? And then you have to make some decisions. And one of the decisions that you might make is that if it's possible to help more people than you hurt, or to help the people that you help more than you hurt the people that you hurt, that sometimes that's okay. The Calder-Hicks compensation principle is all based on that idea. And I think that if you have a chance, you should read about that a little bit. But we're basically saying as long as the people who benefit more than the people who are harmed, perhaps we should make that agreement for society. And several other ideas I think that would be very useful. Make sure you read through. Don't pay an awful lot of attention to the social welfare function. It's usually used more as far as trying to find a maximum or an ideal amount of production of a good within society. And I don't think any of you really wrote anything about trying to maximize production. We're dealing with trying to create better outcomes based on government fixing policy problems. So I'll leave to the rest of you to fight out the great questions of economics in the world. You might want to pay a little bit of attention to the concept of consumer benefit, or the consumer benefit is the amount you'd be willing to pay for a good but aren't forced to. Certainly that's one of the great aspects of any gain from trade in economics or in markets. If you say, hey, I'd give you $500 if you do that, and the person says, hey, no, actually it only costs $8.99. Almost none of you would say, no, I was willing to spend $500. Here's the here's the 591 or 491 that you didn't ask for. All right, so after this module, we're going to move on from markets, and we're going to talk a little bit about when government messes things up. But I think that we've learned a bit now about policy theory. We've learned a bit about markets. Now we need to see whether governments are really all that great at allocating resources. After all, if they're not, then that's going to be a challenge to us as policy professionals. I hope you all have a great next couple weeks, and when we're back at it again, we'll have a better idea of how we're doing in the course. I wish you all well and a lot of good luck on your midterms. Thank you.